everything.
Welcome, Gabbanites and I beckon you to join my vacation. Tonight we'll be doing a ghost walk tour and what's the place called again? Mr. Editor, put that in of where we are.
San Juan Capistrano Ghost Walk.
Hopefully it'll be a really good tour. We'll have parts of it on here in sunny, foggy California. It is currently 7:53 p.m. 7:53 or 4 p.m. and it's 65 degrees outside. On June 4th, which is awesome, we'll be going somewhere. That'll be that for this part of the clip.
A few moments later.
Gift from the Rotary Club of Capistrano to residents and guests who travel this outlook, honors those who have called this valley home and those who proudly support San Juan Capistrano today. Capistrano was founded in 1936. Wow, during COVID. It's 7:57 p.m. and our tour starts in 3 minutes, which I am really excited for. Hopefully it'll be really, really fun. And oh wow, those are lions? That's pretty cool. This is a really cool looking clock. I don't know which way the train's coming from. Wash your hands. Stay safe. That's actually really cool. Oh, there's a conductor guy. Cool.
You were on the right.
I was on the right track.
You're on the wrong side of the track. Good evening, everyone. Can you guys hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Good. It is 8 o'clock. Everyone is here. And so it begins. The most merciful thing in the world, I think, is the inability of the human mind to correlate all of its contents. We live on a placid isle of ignorance amongst the black seas of infinity, and it was not meant that we should travel far. The opening words of H.P. Lovecraft's The Call of Cthulhu. Who here believes in ghosts? Who here does not believe in ghosts? You just came along for the ride, didn't you?
Yep.
Now, the one thing is that when we originally designed the tour, the one thing that we insisted upon tonight is everything we're going to talk about tonight is true. All the history is completely true. Now, as to the ghost stories, they all came to us from the San Juan Capistrano Historical Society, local sources, and interviews with people who live and work in the places we're going to visit tonight. But in the end, I leave it to you. It's as Joseph Doniger, the 20th century mentalist, said, those who believe no explanation is necessary, and those who do not believe no explanation shall suffice. I want to welcome you to Mission San Juan Capistrano. Who here has never been to this town before? You guys haven't been here before? Where are you guys from? From here?
California, but like, I've never been here.
You've never been here? No. Has anybody who's been here before ever not been on this side of the tracks? Because most people who come here, they usually stop at Trevor's and get a drink and never make their way. The first European to walk into this valley is Gaspar Portola in 1769. Before that, it was simply the Ahashaman Native Americans. Now, shortly after Gaspar Portola, a group of Franciscan padres come here with the intention of building a mission. They hang the bells up, but the bells are only up for a few days. That is because of a Native American insurrection in a little place known as San Diego. And so, they take the bells down, they bury them in the sand, and the soldiers will leave. And they will not return until 1776. And they will dig up the bells and they will start building Mission San Juan Capistrano. This street right here, Los Rios, this is the oldest continuously occupied street in California. They started building houses on this street in 1794.
Oh wow.
And we're gonna visit some of them right now. Come this way. This is the home of Polonia Montañas. Polonia is actually born in San Juan Capistrano in 1829. This is her, the elderly woman with the stick, kneeling. Now, she is known as the Pied Piper of San Juan Capistrano. She has a unique gift with children, and When the priests were not in the mission, it was her job to teach them the catechism. So it would not be uncommon for you to walk down this street at the turn of the century and see children kneeling in this dirt as she walked amongst them with her traditional black stick, teaching them the Catholic ritual. And she is attributed with the saving of this town when in 1890 there was a drought here to where the crops were failing and the animals were dying off. So she took all the children in the town and they walked across the Del Obispo Mountains and they prayed and they walked for 3 days. And when they ran into a little beach, which we now call Dana Point, they said that a fog rolled in, followed by a torrent of rain. And it was the prayers of the Doña that saved the town of San Juan. People who work in the area, as well as tourists, have actually walked past this area late at night, and they have claimed to see spectral children kneeling in the dirt, as well as unusual lights have been seen in this garden area. And when this home is opened by the San Juan Capistrano Historical Society, in one room, an unusual light has been spotted, and people have heard chanting, which sounds a lot like the rosary. It seems that the Doña has not left her historic home at all. Come this way.
We have those at our house.
I'm gonna stop right here because there's a car coming. Maybe. Now, really quickly, everybody, that house right there, that is actually one of the newest homes that we're gonna talk about tonight. That home is built in the 1890s. That is the Ramos House Restaurant, and it is known for its poltergeists. Now, one of the things that's interesting when somebody thinks about poltergeists, they think about like Run to the Light, Carol Ann. Okay? But, exactly! There you go! She hasn't seen the movie yet. The one thing is that term is very misunderstood. The term poltergeist actually was first coined by a woman by the name of Catherine Crowe in 1848, who wrote one of the first books about paranormal investigation. And because she was an English woman but spent a lot of time in Germany, she chose the word that the Germans use for a spirit that is known to move objects. Poltergeist. It means noisy ghost. And that's exactly what they have here. When they were converting it from a house to a restaurant, the only people who had access to the house were the workers in the construction crew. And they were allowed to leave their tools there, and they had the only key. They would come back in the morning, and they would find their tools in completely different sections of the house. And even boxes of nails. They would grab a box of nails and walk away, and just moments later, the boxes would be completely strewn across the floor. Several people have seen an elderly woman in the house, and when they do a double take, she is gone. Even the dining area itself is known for its activity, including glasses of water, salt shakers, and other small items have tipped over, and nobody is near them, and people have even seen chairs being pushed away from the tables. The food is quite good.
Maybe they're jealous they can't eat the food.
It's really good for breakfast. The only thing is that when you do go to the historic Ramos house, remember that the empty table next to you is not as empty as you once thought. Come this way, please. When people say we're going to the Rios district, which is what you're in now, a lot of people think the Spanish word for river. And they wouldn't be far off, because right over here is the San Juan Creek. But the reason this place is actually known as the Rios District is because of this home right there. That is the Rios Adobe. That is the oldest continuously occupied house in California. And has been owned by the same family since 1794. It was built by Feliciano Rios. He was a soldier at the mission. It is now owned by Stephen Rios. It is his home and his law office. And for many years, this was once the hiding place of Joaquin Murrieta. Is anybody here familiar with the story of Joaquin Murrieta? He was actually a gold miner. He was quite good at it, but people became jealous of him, and one day, him and his brother were attacked. His brother was killed, and they nearly beat him to death. He recovered from it, and out of this, he became a murder machine. We call it the John Wick of 1850. He killed over 13 men associated with the death of his brother. And then he spent the rest of his career going up and down California, killing and robbing. He attracted so much attention that a special group of people were sent just to get him. They were known as the California Rangers. And when they found him, they shot him, decapitated him, and presented his head to the governor of California. They lost the head in the San Francisco earthquake. Now, the one thing is, I run into a lot of people that say, I've never heard the story of Joaquin Murrieta. You have. He was romanticized in the 1920s, and he became Zorro. Now, the one thing is for people that are into early literature, the first Zorro novel was written about San Juan Capistrano. And for over 150 years, this house has had the reputation of being haunted. One of my favorite stories about it actually came from Stephen Rios' father, who was a well-known in this area. And his father said that when him and young Stephen were going to go hunting in the morning, Stephen was laying in bed and Dad was reading the newspaper. They heard the back door by the kitchen open up, and the footsteps came through the kitchen, and the footsteps stopped right into the living room where Dad is reading the newspaper. Dad looked over the newspaper into the entryway, and he saw nothing. He later said it was as if the dead could sense the living. And the footsteps doubled back, went into a bedroom, and then the footsteps went through the kitchen again, and then they heard the back door shut. Dad got up, went to the back door, and the back door was still locked from the inside. The footsteps are still heard throughout the house by various members of the family, although none of them are concerned because this has been a family home. They simply think it's the descendants looking in on their historic house.
I took the tour of Florence and this is what I'm going to invest in, $50,000 when I get that up.
Pretty.
If you make your way down this walkway past the petting zoo, you'll see those bright lights over there at the end where the tree line is. That actually is a canal. It's where two bodies of water meet, the San Juan Creek and the Trabuco Creek. And since at least the turn of the 19th century, it has been the living place of a La Llorona. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with the story, all two of you, no, it's really funny. The La Llorona story, it's very unique, and then it's unique to the Southwest. The easiest way to explain it is like a Gaelic banshee, a harbinger of death. The story is, it's a woman who has drowned her own children, will look for children to replace her own. It's interesting how we actually found early newspaper clippings talking about women clutching their babies at night because they heard the screaming of the La Llorona outside. I actually have lectured on Latino legends and lore. The La Llorona is basically the Mexican boogeyman. It was originally told by grandmothers to keep young girls from going out and meeting young men. Grandma, it never worked. But it makes good Hollywood. Isn't this house actually rather beautiful?
Yeah.
That is actually the oldest wooden structure in San Juan Capistrano.
Oh, wow.
It's built in the 1870s. It was built by a gentleman by the name of Jose Garcia, and he built it as a present for his wife. And they lived there happily for several years until Jose was killed outside of his own saloon.
Oh.
The gentleman who killed him was supposed to hang for his crimes, but they gave him life in prison instead. And then they bumped it down, and then they bumped it down. Next thing you know, he's out in 1905. Kind of like today. Jose Garcia's wife, who is actually a Yorba, we'll talk about that. She was so distraught about that, in 1905, she sold this house to a gentleman by the name of Albert Pryor, who lived in this house from 1905 till he passed away of complications of a stroke in 1955. The house is believed to be haunted by both the Garcias and Albert Pryor. People who work here, it is now a museum, have heard the crying of a woman in an empty room, as well as there have been reports of Albert on the porch in his traditional gray cardigan sweater in a rocking chair that does not exist. Now, the interesting thing is that this house originally wasn't even here. It was over next to the El Adobe restaurant, which we're going to be visiting later. But after Albert died in 1955, they could not rent it out to anybody. People would only stay for a couple of months and then they left. It finally started to become dilapidated and nobody would take it. The person who owned it gave it to the San Juan Capistrano Historical Society and paid to have it moved here to where it was lovingly restored and turned into a museum where the activity still remains. Let's go to Joe.
Did y'all hear that?
Everybody, do you see that cage right there across the street? That is San Juan Capistrano's second jail. The first one is the El Adobe restaurant. This is actually the second one. It's actually built in 1896. They raised special funds just for it. It originally is not in this location. It was someplace else. It is a very unique structure because it is known for its suicides.
Oh.
In 1920, a gentleman who actually worked here in a restaurant, one of the local restaurants, he was charged with grand larceny. They placed him in the jail overnight and he hanged himself in the cell. After that, people who were charged with crimes demanded to be moved to Santa Ana immediately because they would not spend the night in a cell that was known for its activity. It is actually quite nice to go into it. The one thing I do recommend now, make sure you do not get yourself locked in. Would you guys like to go see it?
Yes.
Of course you would.
Has anybody ever been locked in?
No, it actually requires a bit of work.
Oh,
If you
okay.
walk around, you may go ahead and take a look.
Oh, wow.
Go on around.
Circa 16? No, it says 18. 26.
You're more than welcome to go inside.
Okay,
You have
okay.
time. Everybody's in there. We're not piling in. We're not piling in.
Okay, I'm leaving.
Wow.
Including this place was known for a couple of lynchings. But when you think about it, the nearest real law is Santa Ana in the time period. And so it would not be uncommon for a crime to be committed. You'd pay for the guy you're partying that night. Do a little suggestion of your own. No, more than welcome to. You always put any of it. Actually, all of this adobe, the arts and crafts home back here, and the O'Neill house, and the jail. Come this way, please. We also have a big one for Swallows Day, where you can actually raise money by getting locked in the jail, and people have to bail you out.
Oh, wow. Are y'all having fun?
This is a picture of Orange County's first felon. Doesn't look like much, and then you look at her and you're like, nope, she's dangerous. You want to know the worst part is? She's only 26 in this picture.
Dang.
Her name is Modesta Avila. She lived right here at that restaurant, right there on the edge. And in 1887, she didn't take too kindly that they put railroad tracks 15 feet from her house. To the point that she could not sleep, and chickens, which were her sole source of income, would not lay eggs. And so she filed suit against the railroad. She didn't win. So she decided to stick it to the man. She put her clothesline across the railroad tracks. That didn't work out too well, but she decided to put a railroad tie across the tracks.
Oh.
She did change her mind and didn't go through with it, but she was caught and she was charged with the felony of obstruction of a railroad. Her first trial is a tie. Her second trial got her 3 years in San Quentin. San Quentin used to be a mixed prison, men and women. She died 2 years in of the flu. People who worked at the Hummingbird House Cafe have actually claimed to see her in the restaurant, as well as in the dining room area. Unusual lights have been spotted, and they used to keep a rocking chair on the front porch that on the stillest of nights would rock on its own. Modesta is still angry at the railroad. You can't leave the Rios district without talking probably about the most famous ghost, and that is simply the Lady in White. And she is said to be a beautiful woman in a white dress with long black hair. She is spotted throughout the entire area, but usually by the pepper tree, by the Rios house. It is believed in life that she perhaps may be Doña Berardino. She was the lover of one of Joaquin Murrieta's men. She was a bruja, a witch, which is basically anybody who used medicine that was not condoned by the Catholic Church at the time. But she was a Native American woman who believed that she had a close tie to this area, and it seems that she still lingers on this street today. We are actually going to make our way across the street, across the tracks. Please be careful. Don't become part of the tour. Let's go. The Rios district is beautiful, isn't it? Mm-hmm. I always recommend going there, grabbing lunch, going shopping. There are great historic buildings, and all these historic buildings require a lot of maintenance. The only thing is that the first time the Rios district actually got its first restoration was in 1818, when San Juan Capistrano was attacked by pirates. Okay, maybe that's a bit much, okay? They're privateers. Legal piracy. His name is Hippolyte Bouchard. He's a Frenchman with a letter of marque from Argentina to take out anything that's Spanish.
Huh.
He actually sacked the mission at Santa Barbara, and him and his men are making their way down, and they stop at the mouth of the San Juan Creek, took shallow boats up, walked through the Rios district to the mission, where they politely demanded the treasure. They were denied, and a firefight broke out. They took over the mission, and then they came down here and started burning things to the ground. Bouchard actually did some serious damage, but he did not touch the mission. He was a horrible pirate, but he was a good Catholic. Now, the one thing is that there were stories that the priests, they heard the stories of the privateers coming up, and so they took all the treasures, which was significant at the mission, and they buried them. Not all of it was found. Now, really quickly, I want to welcome you to the Camino Capistrano. This is the main drag of the town. It connects to the Ortega Highway, which is a simple 2-lane highway which will take you all the way to Lake Elsinore. This street right here is known for 2 ghosts. They have something in common. They're both missing their heads. One is actually a padre, has been spotted by the El Adobe, which we're headed to next, in a full habit, missing his head. And the first one was actually written about, probably about 1910, and it was a bell ringer who worked at the mission. And in the pre-dawn hours, he went outside to smoke a cigarette, and when he opened the door, he saw, as he described it, a soldier in a Spanish uniform missing his head. Now, there was a bandit gang that patrolled what is now the Ortega Highway for many years. They were known to kill, and back then, the easiest way to slow down the identity of somebody was to take the head. The reason I like bringing you right here is because there's like a little placard right here in the photo. I'm standing right here. This is this building at the turn of the century. This is the El Adobe restaurant. Has anybody here eaten here before? Yeah? This has actually been a restaurant for over 70 years. It is 2 historic buildings. The building to the north is Miguel Yorba's house. The Yorba family is huge in the history of Orange County. When Gaspar Portola came here in 1769, he brought a retinue of soldiers with him. One of them was Juan Antonio Yorba, and he brought his kids along. Miguel, he built his house right here. The other one is Bernardo. Bernardo, he traveled a little bit more north. He got his own Spanish land grant, and he started the Yorba Rancho, which is now the town of Yorba Linda, and he is buried in that cemetery. Now, remember we talked about Jose Garcia and his wife back at that one house? Jose Garcia's wife is a Yorba. This building right here is San Juan Capistrano's first courthouse and jail. If you want to know something truly demonic about this place, it is Richard Nixon's favorite restaurants. They even have the presidential table here. There is spotted activity here. Most of it is what is known as residual haunts. But there is something definitely different about the wine cellar. It is down in the basement, and it is the old jail cell. Now, the thing is that the activity in this room has caused more than one employee to quit. One of my favorite stories is they actually made the OC register on this one. They purposely hired a waitress and did not tell her the story about what goes on in the cellar. It's pretty jacked up, actually. And then they waited to see if anything would happen until something finally did. They actually saw her running through the restaurant. She took her apron off and would not go back into the restaurants. Now, back in the day, when this was a jail, the only job that the guards had was to make sure you stayed in the jail. If you wanted anything to eat or you needed any clothing at all, that had to come from your family. There was a woman who came here every day and she would feed her son and she would spend time with him. And one day, the guards stopped her, took the food and said, "Today you cannot see your son." This went on for several days. And she later found out that her son had died in the jail and the guards were simply eating the food. They believe that the activity here is the woman looking for the son. Now, the good news is you can eat here. All you have to do is ask for the wine cellar. It comfortably seats, about 5 or 6, I think, is probably your best. And also, watch your head. First off, really quickly, is everybody having a good time?
Yes.
You guys are kind of quiet, I'm worried. Okay, now, it is kind of... Are you scared?
I'm telling them side stories too.
Oh, you're horrible. Now, the one thing is that being a historian, that's my number one thing. I do realize there's a point in time where history becomes legend, which becomes urban legend. So now I want to tell you my favorite urban legend of all of San Juan Capistrano. It is where I hear from people who work in the restaurant as well as locals that there is a tunnel that runs from the jail cell to the judge's house.
Oh.
First off, it hit me, how lazy are you? You can't walk across the street, okay? But the one thing is that isn't even the judge's house. That is Judge Egan. He is actually, this house was built for him, and he was the president of the Board of Education here, as well as he brought the railroad here. He has a very interesting tie to the history of Santa Ana. Is anybody here familiar with a woman by the name of Madame Majetska Canyon? She used to come here for his parties, and she called him the king of Capistrano. The thing I love about this house, though, it's tied directly to a guy we're going to talk about later by the name of Don Juan Forrester. Now, Egan and Forrester didn't get along too well, but he got the job to help build Forrester's beautiful home, which is on the Ortega Highway. And so Egan purposely ordered enough bricks and wood that when he was done building Forrester's house, he would have enough to build his. So in essence, that house was built for free. It's absolutely beautiful. It was a government job. Let's go.
It's a pretty window.
I want to welcome you guys to Mission San Juan Capistrano. Has anybody here been inside the mission before? Outside 4th grade?
I was just there.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorites, isn't it gorgeous? It's gorgeous in there. Okay, now, one of the things is, really quickly, I want to talk about the history of the mission itself. We talked about how the mission first started in 1776, and it's actually prospering under Spanish rule. But then, the population of the town drops a little bit. In 1821, Mexico takes over. The population of the town plummets in 1833 when they pass what is called the Mexican Secularization Act, where Mexico, strapped for cash, sold all the Catholic missions to private landowners, and they kicked the priests out of the church. This mission and all the surrounding farmlands was sold to Don Juan Forrester for roughly $700. How does he make such a deal like this? It's easy. He is Pio Pico's brother-in-law, the governor of California, who gave all of the land back to the church. 3 weeks before his assassination, Abraham Lincoln gave all the missions back to the Catholic Church. And he used federal funds to do it. This place actually survived Spanish rule, it survived Mexican rule, but it could not survive an earthquake. Now the reason I like to stop here is because from here, you actually get to see the ruins, the top of the ruins of the Great Stone Church. This is what it looks like during the daytime. And the one thing I love is I have a photo of what that looked like about the early 1920s. You can see the Great Stone Church right here in ruins. The Great Stone Church actually has a fascinating history. The gentleman who was in charge of its construction, his name was Aguilar. He was brought in just for the job. He was half Spaniard and half Mexica, Aztec. And he was said to be one of the greatest stonemasons in all of Mexico. And so they brought him up, and he was the chief architect of the Great Stone Church. He actually died in the construction in 1803. It was finished in 1806, and it came tumbling to the ground in 1812. Because in 1812, there were 7 earthquakes in 1 week. 1 earthquake every day for a week, and it ran all the way across the San Andreas fault line, which is roughly from Imperial County up to Bodega Bay in northern Cal. Many of the missions actually were damaged by these earthquakes, and even one was destroyed, La Purísima. Those earthquakes gave birth to 2 very famous ghost stories of the mission. One is actually a young woman by the name of Magdalena. She was a high-born Spanish girl. When her father found out that she was actually seeing somebody who worked here in the mission as a painter, he forbid them from being together, and he sent her to church to pray for her sins. He sent her to the wrong mass, because during mass, an earthquake struck, in which the Great Stone Church came crumbling down, and 42 people were crushed. It took them 3 months to remove all of the bodies from the rubble. And when they pulled Magdalena from the rubble, in her hands, she was clutching a single candle. They say that sometimes at night, she can be seen illuminating the Great Stone Church with a single candle. There was a story a while ago that was told to me by somebody who actually works here in the visitor center. Now you guys cannot see it at night, but during the day there was actually a roof line on top of the rubble itself. You see, they did that to slow down the deterioration. That way it doesn't rain real hard and a loose rock comes and, gets a tourist. And so they put a roof line up on a lot of that. And when they were doing it, it was about 2003, they had scaffolding going all the way up. The person who was in charge of this, every day as he started the work, as he put his tool belt on, he would sing a song in Spanish that he remembered as a child. And the person who worked in the visitor center asked him, "Why do you always sing the same song?" And he said, "I'm singing to the spirits of the church." And one day, as he was putting his tool belt on and singing his song, he started to climb the ladder up the scaffolding. He felt a tug on his tool belt. He reached around thinking that a tool got caught on one of the rungs of the ladder. When he realized it wasn't caught, he kept on climbing. He felt another tug. He got a bad vibe and he climbed down. The moment he climbed down, the scaffolding collapsed. He said that the reason that he was saved is because every day he sang to the spirits of the Great Stone Church.
This is amazing.